told you we're going to look this summer through some of Paul's letters to the various churches 2,000 years ago to see what Paul has to say, to see what God has to say through Paul to them, and maybe that's a word for us today. Today we look at Paul's letter to the Galatians, 5th chapter. The first verse just jumps out at me. It says, Christ has set us free for freedom. Which sounds a little redundant, doesn't it? Christ has set us free for freedom. Which is to say, I wonder that Christ has set us free, that freedom might be a part of the way we live our lives every day. Now, let me couch that a little bit. This is a week where freedom is a very popular theme, right? I mean, we celebrate the 4th of July. We remember that our country, some 200 plus years ago, won freedom from England. And so it's a theme that we'll hear throughout the week. And maybe it's one I hope that you'll take time to reflect on. Freedom, as we said in the prayer, is not something that came easily. Many people, some 200 plus years ago, gave of their lives that this could be a nation where freedom is a hallmark of how we do life together. And in the last 200 years, many other people have given of their very lives that freedom could be preserved. So whether you're barbecuing or swimming somewhere or enjoying a beach or whatever you're doing and enjoying, I do hope that there is at least a passing thought, if not more, on Thursday and maybe all week long, that what we enjoy came at a high cost from others, and we should be grateful. But the truth is, we're going to reflect on freedom as a nation some 200 plus years old, but freedom has been a part of what life with God has been about since the very beginning. Paul says we are set free for freedom. This is what life with God is about. God called Moses, as we just heard. Jared must be a mind reader, Jared and Mandy, because I was totally going to cite this. And tells Moses, go to Egypt to set my people free. That from the very beginning of humanity, where people are held in bondage, where people are not fully free, God is there and has cared. Moses, set my people free. Jesus comes and announces his ministry to proclaim the good news, release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to set the oppressed free. That is what Jesus' ministry was to be about. John's Gospel, Jesus calls his disciples and says that by the truth, that's truth with a capital T, which is to say the truth of God in Christ, the truth shall set them what? Free. Freedom is one of the core values of what life with God is about. And so yes, Paul begins this 5th chapter by talking to the church in Galatia about freedom. You are set free for freedom's sake, because that is a core value of what life with God is about. But the problem is Paul's also writing to a very divided, conflicted church. The lectionary, it doesn't always get it right, and it cut out some very important verses in between verse 1 and verse 13. But there are two kind of warring factions in the church in Galatia that Paul's addressing. One is a group who thinks they are justified by the law. Now, specifically circumcision. That was the hot button issue. You know, if you're circumcised, then you're a person of faith. If you're not, then you must not be as clean. They can't get past this notion of legalism, even in the church. Well, the truth is, 2,000 years later, we still can't get past this notion of legalism in the church. Paul says, look, I'm telling you that if you yourselves have been circumcised, having Christ won't help you. Again, I swear, every man who has himself circumcised, that he is required to do the whole law. But you people are trying to be made righteous by the law, and you've been made estranged from Christ. You have fallen away from grace. The moment people of faith become so legalistic and judgmental, and I don't care what the issue is, but the moment that we take the law to such an extreme that we exclude people, that we act as though some just can't measure up to what life with God is meant to be, when we beat people up with our legalism, We have fallen away from grace. And that's hard to swallow. But it's true. And it's a struggle that the church always has had and still has. But what is righteousness? Paul says in verse 6, faith working through love is what matters. Faith working through love. Faith working through love is the outward signs, love, of an inward grace, which is faith, that is made tangible for others, for the world to see that love is real through you. And in that we have freedom. But there's a second side that was warring with the legalist in Galatia. It's kind of the other extreme too. This side says, look, we're free. We have salvation in Jesus. We can do whatever we want now. We're free to just be ourselves. YOLO, right? We can do whatever we want. Self-indulgence doesn't matter. We're free. And Paul's saying, look, half of y'all are legalists over here and you're slaves to the law. Half of you are just do whatever you want to do, and that's still a form of slavery because it makes you deaf to those who are in need around you when all you worry about is your own self-indulgence. It makes your soul sick when all you worry about is self-indulgence. Now, a little self-indulgence is okay. I don't think Paul would say that that's wrong, but to focus your life on how you can give into your own passions and your own indulgences, and it's a life that's lived looking inwardly. I thought about that this week and fruits of the Spirit, which I'll talk about in a moment. But it occurred to me watching my son Sam. Sam's just over 2 years old, and we've stumbled into doing this right with Sam where we got it wrong with Olivia. Sam doesn't have much of a taste for sweets and sugar. It's kind of cool that way. But Olivia, we didn't do it as well. We introduced sugar probably too soon. That's a sugar tooth like none other. But Sam thinks fruit is like dessert. I mean, I can't keep strawberries in the house, okay? I mean, he'll wake up before you can put breakfast on the table and eat 3 or 4 strawberries. He'll come home from school and he'll want 3 or 4 strawberries or a banana. Right after dinner, he wants more of it. Part of it's the novelty. He can carry it around and eat it, while he walks around the house. But he thinks that is what dessert is. And it made me realize that self-indulgence, much like sugar, too much of it can make your soul sick. Too much self-indulgence can make you sick on the inside. But the way to freedom is through fruit, specifically the fruit of the Spirit. I mean, did you hear what the fruits of the Spirit were? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, goodness, self-control. These are not things that are meant to limit the way we live and to suck the fun out of our life. They're actually things that open us up to a deeper, more rich life than maybe we ever could have imagined. A life where it just comes natural that we love and care for others. And that at the end of that life, it is so full of memories and connections and deep relationships with people, that love is so alive in you that these fruits help us toward that fruitful life. One of my newest friends, I think, is one that lives a life of the fruits of the Spirit. Part of it is because he's just so humble, he doesn't really even realize it. It just comes natural. A couple weeks ago, I was at an annual conference, and this is where Jeff and I got to be such good friends. This was the day of the elections for the delegation and general conference and all that Methodist rah-rah, and I was trying to run and get elected, and I didn't make it. And so I was a little sore, tuck tail, and I leave, go to lunch, had kind of a downer of a morning. And I decide that I'm sulking. You know how it is when you're disappointed, you just kind of get in that sulking mode, and I'm sulking. And I had friends invite me to lunch. I don't want to be around anybody. I want to eat by myself. I'm sulking right now. And as I'm sulking through the streets of downtown Columbus, I walk up one of the streets, and here comes Jeff Hansen walking down the street carrying 2 boxes of pizza. Of course, I'm sulking, and Jeff says, "Hey, Ben, what's going on?" I said, "Well, Jeff, elections, and I'm sulking." And he says, "Well, do you want some pizza?" I said, "Well, Jeff, isn't that pizza for somebody?" Like, you assume he's taking it back, there's a meeting or something happening. And this is literally what he said to me. And he said, no, I just bought 2 pizzas because I figured I'd run into somebody who needed pizza today. Here's the coolest thing, though. Because of my friend Jeff Hansen and a few slices of pizza that he freely gave, my sulking got turned around. God's grace was reintroduced that day in my life. And I wonder, it almost makes you laugh, but what seemingly small ways could we focus our attention a little less on ourselves? And, I don't know, say things like, hey, maybe I'll just buy a pizza and run into somebody who needs lunch that day, who's in a bad mood, or maybe who hasn't had a meal. Who knows, right? How could we orient our lives? This is what the fruit of the Spirit leads us toward, is a life where you just buy pizza, trusting God that somebody's going to need it that day, and you're willing to share it. And it's beautiful. This is the fruit of the Spirit. But Paul is saying that whether it's legalism or self-indulgence, we are enslaved, and we cannot live into that fruitful kind of life so long as we are enslaved. What are the things that you're enslaved to? Think about it. I don't know, for most of us, we're Americans, and especially this week, this is our week to celebrate freedom. We're free from everything. But are we really? How many of us, whether we want to admit it or not, are enslaved to anger, bitterness, hurt? You may say, well, I'm not enslaved to that, but how much does it actually control your life, your decision making, the ways you view others? You may not realize it. There may not be physical shackles, but you're enslaved. How many of us are enslaved to work and being productive all the time? As though somehow our life's value isn't met if can't churn out enough results over the course of a day. As though somehow God doesn't love us just the way we are before we've produced a single thing in our life. But we're enslaved to this notion of productivity. And it's good to be productive. It's good to work. I love to work. Many of you know that. But if that work goes to such an extreme that we can't pull away and trust that the world will keep turning without us for just a day or two or a week, then we are enslaved to what it means to work. I'm going to say something out loud for accountability's sake. You'll hear it. I'll say it. My family's in the room. They'll hear it as well. One of the things occurred to me that I'm going to work really hard on, I mentioned I'm going to be out of town for a few days, is this. I'm bad about this, so that's why I'm saying it out loud for accountability. I am not going to touch my email for 10 days. Don't email me. I'm just giving you fair warning. You're not going to hear back from me. I love you, but I'm not going to email you back. Now, if you have an emergency, call or text me, obviously. But a little bit of that phone scrolling, a little bit of, I got to tend to this right now. I was talking to somebody before church, and they reminded me, you can't do this just a little bit, ministry. You're either all in or you got to pull all out. I got to pull all out for a few days because I might miss something with my family because I'm enslaved to being busy. So I want you to hold me accountable to that and help me. We're all enslaved to different things, but we're called to a life where we might be set free to love and to serve. What is love in action? Paul writes about that. What does that even look like? Love in action. The theologian Reinhold Niebuhr said that love means being responsible. You say, well, that isn't very clear. But Niebuhr goes on to say love is being responsible. You're responsible to your family. You're responsible to your community. You're responsible to the world around you. Which is to say, love is about something beyond just yourself. Being set free in love is about that love growing hands and feet and getting into action. That's what it means to love. Frederick Buechner, great writer, had a test of what it means to love. And Buechner said, you know how well you're loving by asking yourself this question: when was the last time you cried for somebody other than yourself? Think about it. When was the last time you were moved to tears for somebody other than yourself? That's a convicting test of love, isn't it? The great basketball coach Jim Valvano gave that famous speech at the ESPYs years ago before he died, that every day, he says, we should strive to do 3 things. One is to laugh, one is to cry, and the other is to love. What a full day, Valvano says, if we can find something to laugh at, if we can find something that moves us to tears, and if we can love. When was the last time you were moved to tears for someone else? And if it's been a while, how could we reorient our attention to love and care beyond ourselves, that we might be set free for compassion and empathy for others? One got me this week. I don't know, you probably saw the news reports. It was kind of this viral thing that went around. But I mentioned it in the prayer that we've, a lot of powerful, smart, strong people are having to make some decisions, hopefully, about a crisis at the U.S.-Mexican border. And the politics of it all is kind of above my pay grade. And, I don't fully understand it all. And there's a lot of stuff that needs to be decided, and people need to come together and build bridges to care for other people. So I don't know what the answer to an immigration crisis is, but I do know this, that picture of that father and his not quite 2-year-old daughter, face down having drowned in the Rio Grande River. I don't know what the answer to that is from a political standpoint, but I know that images like that break the heart of God. And I also know that images like that, because they break God's heart, should break our hearts too. And we're not all politicians in the room, and like I said, there's a lot of smart people above my pay grade who need to make some decisions. But maybe images like that can convict us to do something, to care, to welcome a stranger in our life, to care with grassroots efforts for those who are seeking a life of freedom in this country, where our core value, one of them, is freedom. That on our very best days, we've all had people in our family lineage from all places of the world who wanted a better life, and by the power of God came here to get it. I don't know what the policy answer is to all of that, but I do know that each of us are called in Jesus' name to welcome the stranger. So what does love in action in your life look like? How could you be set free this week, in the weeks ahead, in your years ahead? That love can be real and others experience it through you. That you could be moved to tears for the sake of someone else. One last story that I always think about. A couple years ago, the Westboro Baptist Church, they go around protesting funerals, protest everything. They go around and they like to protest funerals. And a wonderful story a couple years ago that they decide they're going to protest one of these funerals. And of course they announce it ahead of time. They want everyone in the press and everybody to know that they're coming. Well, some counter-protesters decided they were not going to dominate this funeral. And they show up before the Westboro Baptist Church is across the street picketing. And they're wearing these big life-sized angel wings. Now, part of it is the symbolism of, hatred on one side of the street and God's angels on the other. But the other part is those wings were big enough that they could block their vision, so they couldn't even see what was happening with the funeral. And they begin at some point during the counter-protest time, they begin to sing the hymn, Amazing Grace. One of the great hymns of the church that just stands in awe of the grace of God in our lives and how amazing it is, how unmerited it is. And I love the news report that one writer wrote that an onlooker to all that was happening, protest, counter-protest, said something along the lines of that an onlooker reported that the sounds of Amazing Grace drowned out the sounds of hate. How could love in action in your life drown out hate? How could grace become so rich in your life that it sings through you every day? This is the path to freedom. Amen.